I want you to know, before you step outside, that you are a warrior. You are a warrior who is allowed to be soft, a warrior that is allowed to be scared, a warrior that is allowed to ask for help, but still a warrior. I need you to know that when I am writing this, I have changed my outfit 17 times. I have removed my makeup for fear of insult. I have changed the way I walk down the street, but that I am still a warrior. I need you to know that when I am writing this, I have told myself it is okay to wish for something easier. I have told myself it is okay to sometimes want to give up. I have told myself it is okay to feel alone, but that I am still a warrior. I want you to know before you step outside that there are others stepping here too. That people have stepped before us, with us, and after us, that the pavements can feel so lonely, but I know I have stepped there too. That we have existed before and exist in the present and exist in the future, that we come from a line of warriors we did not ask to fight, but we know how to survive. Before you step outside, we love you. Before you step outside, I love you. Before you step outside, breathe. I love you. Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Travis Albanza. I'm an artist, I'm a performer, I'm a writer, and amongst many other things, I am also trans. And I say this to kind of get it out the way, as a kind of not disclaimer, as a kind of thing that I feel needs to be said often in public space so that we can move forward. I say this not because it is the be-all and end-all of my talk, but I say this because I feel it is a central point to my talk, and I want us to be on the same page. I think so often trans people in public space have to constantly declare their transness in order to move forward. So here I am, in this big, scary, really big, scary room, declaring that I am trans. But I feel like often at the moment, with trans people all over the media, calling it the trans tipping point, that we think we all know what trans means. But just for the sake of this talk, let me go through a really brief 101 description. This isn't going to be your Judith Butler. This isn't going to be your gender theory lesson. This is mainly the means to an end, so we can move forward. Trans, in short, with this description, means that all of us, at birth, were made a decision without our consent. Every day when someone is born without their consent, they are told they are either boy or girl. We then go forth and are told we have to live that life becoming boy to man, to girl to woman. Trans, in short, just means that you were given that without your consent and you've decided that that does not fit. In short, trans just means you were told a gender without your consent at birth, and now, in whatever shape or form, you are not that gender. There's another word I'm going to be using today throughout this talk that I think we should just get on the same page with, and that is cis or cisgender. In short, basically meaning not trans, meaning that that decision without your consent at birth that you were a boy or a girl kind of still fits with you now and you're all right with it. So me, I'm trans. Insert big TED Talk balloons come down, confetti cannon, and everyone twirls round and applause. But really, all that it means is that I was given something, boy or manhood at birth, and that is not who I am. That I decided to declare my autonomy over my body and say, actually, that doesn't fit. I actually exist somewhere over here or somewhere over there or somewhere in the middle, but it's actually none of our business for this talk. Trans people can exist in many different shapes, sizes, looks, or identities. Trans people can look like me, can not look like me, and trans people over evolution have also mastered the ability to become invisible. That was a joke. Trans people also have a sense of humor. So, moving on from our 101 definition, what am I actually here to talk about? I'm actually here to talk about something that goes beyond trans and cis, that goes beyond these identities and into something that we all experience, into something that every one of us in this room, in order to get here, has experienced. So I read a poem from my book today, and I did that for two main reasons. My first reason is because I'm a writer, and I thought that starting out with one of my poems would make me a lot less nervous. Side note, it really didn't. But two, because from that book, every single poem, diary entry, and essay that I had written on public transport. I had written outside. I had written in the public sphere, whether on a bus, on a tube, sometimes even on a plane. And that is the experience that I want us to be talking about today. the experience of going outside. 2 years ago, I became obsessed with this notion of something that bonded us all, or most of us all, together. The fact that most of us all go outside. We all go outside, we all go from A to B, we all get on tubes or buses or trains. But what I was really interested in is how we were experiencing this differently. And that's what I want to talk with you about today. Who is going outside? How are we experiencing going outside, knowing that so many of us are afraid of going outside, but in that fear, whose fear is actually being heard? I want to take you back to April 2016. I was on Waterloo Bridge, which is a really busy bridge in London, and it was about 2 p.m., broad daylight, and it was sunny for once. And I say 2 p.m. because that is the lunch rush hour. For people that are from London in the room, everyone knows that Waterloo Bridge is ridiculously busy. It almost feels like a conveyor belt. Whenever I walk on Waterloo Bridge, I always think that I'm in a movie, but not one of those good movies. I feel like a robot. But what I'm trying to say is that there was loads of people. And at that moment at 2 p.m., I remember someone shouted the word tranny and threw a chicken burger at my shoulder. I will repeat. In broad daylight at 2 p.m. on Waterloo Bridge, around 150 people witnessed a person throw a burger at me whilst calling me a tranny as it hit my shoulder. Now, I noticed some gasps or tuts or shocks, but I'm actually not here to talk about the moment of violence in that act of throwing the burger. I'm not here to talk about the man that threw it. I'm not here to talk about what the burger smelt or tasted like. I'm not here to theoreticize about who or what his intentions were. Instead, I'm here to talk about the violence in the surrounding moments after that attack. I'm here to talk about some kind of violence that I feel is not spoken about enough, and that is the violence in silence. That is the violence in the fact that 150 people saw another person throw a chicken burger at another human being, and no one did a thing. I do not want to call it bystanding, for I feel bystander suggests something that is so much more passive than what is happening. Instead, I want to talk about the active choice in the silence of protecting trans and gender non-conforming people in public. Some people pretended not to see and looked down. Many people looked at me, looked at the burger, looked at him, and carried on walking. One lady even looked at me in the eye as if to say sorry, but never quite saying it, and then walked at a faster pace moving forward. I actually had to touch the mayonnaise on my dress to make sure that it was real. Because if you'd looked around moments after, it would have looked like any other day. And this was a real changing point for me as a trans person existing in public space. I'm not saying this was the first type of harassment I'd received, anything but that. But what I did notice in that moment is something that I felt was so absurd as a burger being thrown at another human being was so normalized to everyone else. What I realized in that precise moment is that trans and gender non-conforming people are not protected in public space. We are attacked, but then also not protected when we are attacked. That there is a silence surrounding our violence, and that actually that is part of the violence. What I realized in that moment is not just the attacker who is at fault, but actually by everyone remaining silent on that bridge, it tells the attacker that he can go the next day and do the exact same thing and no punishment will be received. Now, I could have spoken about the violence today, but I'm going to judge that we're all this liberal room that feel like we're okay with trans people because we shared an image of Caitlyn Jenner on our Facebook. But actually, 150 people on that Waterloo Bridge looked exactly like you all did now, albeit a bit smaller amount. So I have to wonder, I can no longer take it and say that yes, people will protect me because actually evidence has shown otherwise. And I want to give you another example because I really want to reinstate that this violence, this moment of the burger being thrown, is not some absurd thing out of the blue, that this kind of violence happens to trans and gender non-conforming people every time we step outside. 2 months ago, I was doing a gig in Nottingham, and it ended around 11:30, and I was walking back home with some friends. I saw the McDonald's, and I was just really, really hungry, and shamefully, I want to pretend that that wasn't the restaurant I went into, but it was. And I went into the McDonald's, and it was really, really busy. And it was about 11:30 on a Saturday night, so it was packed and rowdy, and there was lots of different people. But I felt okay, because I was with my two friends. I walked in and instantly I heard a laughter that is also familiar. I am so used to this laughter, a laughter directed at my body, a laughter that is telling me that I am not human but rather an object. What was different, though, is the laughter was not coming from customers, but in fact the staff behind the counter. The staff could not hold in professionalism and instead started to laugh, point, and gawk at me. They said to the chef, "I can't believe we have to cook for this it." I decided I wasn't going to take it. I decided that I'd already been harassed 3 times that day. I was not going to stand for this. So I retaliated. I shouted back. I said something along the lines that I thought was quite elegant, but probably shouldn't be said because my mum is now watching. And then a security guard came up to me, and I thought, okay, maybe I'm about to be at ease. But instead, actually, what happened was the security guard asked me to leave. He said, "Take your food and leave quietly." And what happened in that moment is not only did the busy room of restaurant people not do anything, but also 2 men cheered when I left. What this tells me, again, is not only that we are not protected in our violence, but we are actually victim-blamed for the violence we experience. I repeat, we are victim-blamed for the violence we experience. Because of our transgression of gender, because we are deviant from the rules of man or woman, we are seen as believing/deserving of the violence we then experience. Now, some of you may be saying, hold on a minute, trans people aren't the only people that experience harassment. Of course, there's probably many cisgender women in the room that also worry about going home at night, that also hold their phone, that also talk about cabs at night. And I'm not disputing that violence, but I do think there is a difference in how that violence is perceived and what kind of harassment is noted. And I'll give a really quick illustration to demonstrate that. On a tube, 3 months ago, Victoria Line, Brixton up to Seven Sisters, it was very, very busy, and I could see a woman was sat down and a drunk man stood up and called her a slut. Instantly, the whole room or the tube erupted. Within 1 stop, the man was ejected, the woman was being offered a bottle of water, and I even stood up and was like, "Hey, are you okay? Do you want to take 2 seats?" And at first, I thought this was a really good example of community coming together, but I couldn't help but admitting that I was actually quite jealous afterwards, quite angry. Because 2 weeks prior on that very same tube, I was called a faggot by a group of men and no one did anything. 2 weeks before that, a mum actually tutted at me and asked why I was making a scene, and someone else laughed and continued to read their paper. I could go on and on with experiences, but I'm well aware I'm already over time. Instead, what I want to point out is that what this is doing is showing that some people are believed in the violence they experience and others are not. And what this does is create a dangerous cycle that means that violence won't stop. Adverts about harassment almost never show people that look like me. And although that woman was also protected by other privileges such as whiteness, no visible disability, no visible religion that would have meant that she was discriminated against, I can't help but also believe that her cisness, that being that she wasn't trans, was a focal point of the fact that she was being able to see as a victim. This is not an option for me. This is an epidemic of violence that faces trans and gender non-conforming people every day. All of the trans people that I live with constantly say every single day that they are harassed and that no one did anything. So what do we do? I don't really want to give this neat TED wrap-up where I say that I have all these ideas about what we're going to do because I probably would have tried them by now. Instead, I guess I just wanted you to meet a real-life, actual trans person off of your screens and realize what we are experiencing is real and killing us. I wanted us to realize that when we step outside, we need to stop thinking about an individual and start thinking as a collective. That in this current political climate, so many of us are fearful about going outside, and we need to start realizing that we are a community rather than an individual. We cannot look down and hope the next person will do something because chances are they won't. Ask how your trans friends are getting home. Pay for our transportation until it is safe for us to go public. Start acting like you are not the only person in the room and instead smile at us after you look at us. Because you're probably the 7th person that's looked at us on that journey. Trust us and believe us when we say we are in danger and need your help. I've been trying to do this on my own, but I can no longer do it. I think I also started with this book because it's called Before I Step Outside, You Love Me. And I think it's as simple as that. I wonder what it would feel like to be loved and cared for outside. Trans and gender non-conforming people, I love you.